Let's start with a quote. It's a travesty of a mockery of a sham, of a mockery of a travesty of two mockeries of a sham. No, former President Trump did not say that about his criminal trial in New York City, where jury selection entered its second day, though he might have. No, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer did not say that about impeachment articles against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, hand-delivered this afternoon by House Republicans, though he might have. And no, Supreme Court justices did not use those words to describe the use of a law written about the collapse of an energy company, Enron, to prosecute January 6th rioters, though some justices genuinely appeared uncertain that law was being fairly applied. So, what is a sham? Paying to kill or create tabloid stories during a presidential campaign and then trying to hide the evidence, or turning those actions into a felony? What is a mockery? Impeaching a cabinet secretary over policy differences, or an immigration policy that has, by any measure, created more hardship, chaos, and uncertainty for migrants, border communities, and lately, big cities? What is a travesty? Lying about a verified and legal presidential election prompting a riot to block the peaceful transfer of power? Or using a law about documents and finance to punish some Capitol rioters for trespassing? It seems that all at once we are testing our definitions of justice, of precedent, of what laws apply and how, and more to the point, how we punish, who we punish, and why. You know that line we started with about a travesty of a mockery of a sham? It comes from a 1971 movie called Bananas. It's about an American, a New Yorker, in fact, who quite comically becomes the leader of a mythical banana republic and is later tried for being disloyal to America. It was a satire of its time, when funny people spoofed our legal and political system. Not as now, when so many legal and political things look and feel bananas, but hardly anyone is laughing. Speaking of New York, that's where we begin today. Robert Costa and Katrina Kaufman are both covering the Trump trial. And while jury selection seemed to be difficult at first, progress was made late this afternoon. Robert, I want to start with you. You're joining us via Zoom because that's the most efficient way you can both take care of us and the needs of others of the network. Tell to us about what happened today in terms of jury selection and what we learned about the biographies of some of the jurors selected.
Well, it's great to be with you. I'm very close to the court where former President Donald Trump was all day. This day started out very slowly, the jury selection process, but just within the last hour or so, some real breaking news. We now have 6 jurors who have been seated in this historic trial, 3 men, 3 women, including a nurse who said in court, quote, "No one is above the law. I am here for my civic duty." A teacher who claimed she was not very interested in politics and did not have strong opinions on the former president. And the foreperson for this juror, we have now learned, based on the great reporting of our colleague Graham Cates and our colleague Katrina Kaufman, is a salesperson originally from Ireland who now lives in West Harlem. These are some of the details, Major, that are now emerging as Judge Juan Merchan here in New York, in Lower Manhattan, is trying to move pretty quickly to get a jury seated for the criminal trial of former President Donald Trump. What was most notable today is that the Trump lawyers spent a lot of time looking at the social media posts of some of these potential jurors, wondering, have they posted anything that could be perceived as biased against Trump? It was just a chaotic scene, Major. I spoke to a possible juror who had been excused, and about the tension inside that room at this historic moment.
And Katrina, I want to pick up on that point that Bob just made about the tension in the courtroom. You were there. Describe the atmospherics. Describe some of the interaction on day 2 of this process.
There was quite a bit of tension this afternoon, especially as Bob was talking about when they were debating over some of these jurors. They had pulled some social media posts, and it got rather contentious. At one point, the judge actually chastised Trump to his lawyer, Todd Blanche, because while one of the jurors was in the room for this private questioning about their social media posts, the judge said that Trump made audible remarks, and he said that he will not tolerate that in this courtroom. Ultimately, a couple of the 4 cause challenges were used, and then each side used some of their peremptory challenges to get rid of other jurors, leaving us with the 6 that we have now. And when I left the courtroom, they were questioning the remaining jurors from that first batch of 96, one of whom said that he does have some ties to Trump. He mentioned he'd read The Art of the Deal. He lives on the Upper East Side, and that he knows people who know Trump, and Trump was looking quite intently during that moment.
And Katrina, much was made yesterday about Trump's demeanor and his attentiveness. Any observations today about how attentive the former president was or was not on this day?
Yes, so earlier we really think we caught him napping again, on and off, and then he was kind of bringing up the juror question sheet to look at that and then nodding off. But just now he was really watching these jurors who were being questioned and, really trying to see who might be judging him in this case, in addition to the people who have already been selected.
Robert, in addition to all the things that you gleaned today, what are your observations now 2 days into this process, which we have never seen before play out in American legal or political history?
Well, to give you a sense of how it was here in New York, in Lower Manhattan, yesterday, Major, a lot of protesters, anti-Trump protesters, pro-Trump protesters, curious onlookers, a ton of NYPD in their blue uniforms. Today, very few protesters. It was almost like a quiet part of the city. But yes, Secret Service personnel were there, but New York was going about its business. It's not like New York lost interest, but it's clearly evident that people are going on with their lives, not enthralled to the jury selection of this trial. And I had the chance to speak with the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, today. And I said, Mr. Mayor, how are you going to handle the lack of protesters today? And he said, you know what? We're going to reduce the size of the footprint of the NYPD here, have it adjustable. So if there's a high profile witness, maybe they have more police in the street. But on a quiet day like today, where it was all about jury selection, he said New York is going to be flexible and shrink that security footprint, not in terms of making it less safe, but not having all these police officers just standing around.
And Katrina, what can you tell us, to the degree we know it, about the schedule going forward?
So for the jurors who were selected so far, the judge told them that they should expect to come back on Monday at 9:30, potentially for opening arguments, but that could change. Tomorrow we're off, and then the rest of this week is going to be spent vetting remaining jurors because we still need another 12. There's going to be 12 jurors total and then about 6 alternates chosen for this trial.
And Katrina, under what conditions will those jurors, once selected, operate?
So this will be an anonymous jury, and E. Jean Carroll was as well, but it's interesting that they're doing this because this is usually reserved for mafia and gang cases, and the lawyers do know the jurors' identities, but the public will not, and the jurors are also not supposed to reveal them to each other.
And Robert, to the point you made a moment ago about day 2 having less crowd interest than day 1, do you think that in any way, the way this trial continues to play out, and if it does follow that day 2 pattern as opposed to day 1, where this is basically a methodical, procedural, legal process, some of the political atmospherics might drain away from the former president, which he has so skillfully used? And I don't say that as an editorial. That's just a straight-up observation based on the year that's already transpired. Do you think some of that might drain away from the former president?
My assessment as a reporter, frankly, is no. And here's why. You know, on television sometimes, maybe even on CBS, sometimes old TV shows are revived, brought back. They have a revival of some sorts. Well, what we're seeing here is a revival of a certain time in Donald Trump's life, the 2016 campaign. And the cast of characters from that episode of his life are going to be coming down to Lower Manhattan as witnesses. Hope Hicks, his high-profile former communications advisor, Michael Cohen, the former fixer, Stormy Daniels, David Pecker with the National Enquirer, at least formerly of the National Enquirer. All of these people might be called as witnesses, expected to be called as witnesses. Those won't be quiet days in New York, even though it's a quiet day today.
And Robert, also, this case is sometimes summarized as a hush money case, but it was made clear yesterday in some of the opening statements, this is a little bit broader than that. It's about not only killing stories, but planting stories and having it influence the 2016 campaign. Did that strike you as something broader than maybe it's been shorthanded or in its more compressed description?
Well, it all depends on whom you ask, Major. For example, that's how many of the prosecutors here, including the district attorney of Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, see the case. What's notable, though, is that Bragg is not prosecuting Trump exactly on those charges that he was part of a criminal scheme, but he was saying, and he's saying in a sense with this prosecution, Trump made hush money payments with criminal intent to be part of a criminal scheme. So he's not prosecuting the scheme of killing all of these stories through the National Enquirer in different payments, but he's using that as a reference point to put together what would usually be a collection of misdemeanors into felony charges because he sees broader criminal content, to your question, based on what Trump's intent was here, was to participate in felonies, in his view, that were part of a broader scheme, but he's not prosecuting on the scheme itself. That's just a notable thing to remember here. It's a little complicated legalese, but at the end of the day, this is about hush money payments, but it's about the context of hush money payments as well.
Robert Costa and Katrina Kaufman, thank you very much. Of course, we will rely on you throughout this proceeding in New York and thereafter. Thank you again so very much.